And good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. We made it through the week. I'm Bryan Armentrout with the Food Safety Foundation from lovely Loveland, Colorado. Hope your day is starting off well. And I'm with the talented and energetic Jill Stuber. Jill, how are you doing today?
I'm great this morning, Bryan. Thanks for having me on your show today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I love having you on the show, and I love the sunflower background you have. That is just fits the summer mood perfectly.
It does, and it's fantastic for the long Minnesota days. Then I always have some sunshine, even when it's 30 below. So
there you go. How's the weather up there in Minnesota? It's been pretty hot here in Colorado.
We have a heat wave coming, so we're enjoying today being outside, and then I think the next few days we're in the 90s, which for here that's pretty warm. So
how's the humidity?
I always chuckle because with 10,000 lakes, as soon as the heat turns on, right, it's humid right away. So that's okay. We're used to it.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as the mosquitoes are kept down, that's the best part. So everybody, of course, this is the Food Safety Chat. We do this live every Friday. Mohammed, nice to see you back again. I love it. From Iran. Can you believe that? Isn't that amazing?
Oh my God.
Nice to have you here. Welcome.
Wow.
We do the Food Safety Chat live here on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube every Friday at this time. So 8 a.m. Mountain Time, where I'm at in Loveland, Colorado, and 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And so, of course, in Iran, a very different time. I'm sure middle of the night, probably, well, at least later in the day there for sure. And we talk about all things food safety. And so this, unlike most things that you see relative to presentations out there, this is a conversation. Good morning, Austin. Nice to see you. And this is meant to be interactive. And so please, in the comments here, guys, let us know what you're thinking as we're going along, and we will answer your questions as we're having our conversation. And let us know, as people are doing here, let us know where you're at in the world, because that just is absolutely fascinating to me. So good morning, Tetki. Hopefully I said that correctly. Nice to see you.
Morning. And yeah, it's really fun to see people that I know, we've talked to before. It's really great to see everyone joining.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, I mean, what's nice about this too, right, is it's some of that interaction that over the past year or so that we've been missing. Your conferences are starting to start up a little bit, right? So was it IAFP is having their meeting here next week. So unfortunately, I won't be able to be there, but EAS Consulting, which I work with, is going to be there along with certified labs. So that's good. Tom, nice to see you, my friend. Foggy San Francisco. Yes. I spent some time working, covering with a company I worked for out in the Valley. And that was every morning, fog, every single morning.
So to expect.
It was crazy. You had to be really careful driving. But today, Jill and I are going to talk about a really interesting subject. And it's around the side of really what Jill and I spend a lot of our time doing. And that's mentoring and coaching and helping people. And right, there's a couple of ways to do that, right? You can do that inside of a company and help your team and things like that. But then there's also outside resources that you can use as well, too. And so we wanted to kind of talk about that and really kind of go through that. And what I wanted to kind of do to start off with this, Jill, because we were chatting here a little bit before the live stream started. And I don't know if we've really kind of explained our background. So maybe, Jill, that's a good place to start, is kind of introduce the people to you and your journey so far.
Oh, sure. No, I'd love to.
Hold on. I'm sorry, before.
Yes. How could we have forgotten this very important step?
Everybody, please join us for a sip of your favorite beverage. Cheers, everyone. I'm just so anxious to get started here. I always do that.
We jump in.
Yes. Anyway, sorry, Jill. My apologies.
No. I love the food industry, and I think I was destined for it because I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. And at the time, I knew nothing about food science, but I thought I was going to be an animal science major. I fell into food science as one of those elective classes, and everything clicked. Like basic micro, basic chem, organic chem, right? All those things came together. And so I have been on this path related to food safety ever since then, because I'd worked in the lab in the university. And, through that, I've always been in quality systems, whether it was ISO or a GFSI scheme. And along the way, I kind of moved from being technical to then leading people. And I was one of these folks who thought, well, I'm a good person. I know what I'm doing. I'm smart. Leading people, like, right, just do the right thing. Data will set you free. Rely on science. And that worked when I was in a lab. But then when I moved into being a corporate quality manager across facilities, I learned those skills weren't the same things that operations or corporate or others were looking for. And I had a really big gap in moving from being all technical to being a really good leader.
Mm.
And so that's really what led me into this path, because I screwed it up. I figured things out. I got outside help. And now what I'm doing is kind of paying back, because people don't have to go through that same struggle, and there is help out there. And so that's what I am committed to do, and I'm passionate doing that.
Nice. Well, I mean, growing up on a dairy farm, I mean, I don't think there's probably any better way to learn a work ethic than doing that. I mean, the saying is, what if you own a dairy farm, you never go on vacation, right? You can't. The cows are there. The cows need to be taken care of 24/7. And it's a lifelong dedication. And as part of a family doing that dairy work, wow, I mean, that's incredibly tough. And yeah, you're set for life if you go through that, and everything after that probably seemed like a piece of cake.
At the time, I didn't appreciate it, but as I got older, I was like, wow, I'm not even sure how to raise my own kids without being able to have that experience as a work ethic. But believe me, when they see my list every morning of things to get done, we're on the same path.
Oh yeah, my family's from Iowa, and yeah, we would go out and walk beans with our cousins and things like this. And for them, it's just like, oh, no big. And by the end, my brother and sister and I were just like, oh my God, this was, I made the mistake of wearing shorts, right? So my legs are all cut up from all the weeds and the leaves and stuff. It's just like, oh my goodness. And I bucked hay one day with my cousin and loaded up a truck with hay bales, and you are just sore from head to toe. And they're just laughing at you. They're just laughing.
You laugh, but it's so much fun. I mean, it's fun, even though it's hard work, but it really set the tone for where I'm at now and what I do. So
absolutely. And yeah, I think because part of the trap, especially when you're working for a company, like large company, small company, it doesn't really matter. There are certain beliefs that we're told when we're young, and maybe things have changed now, but I don't think so. Where there's certain beliefs that we're given, right? Is that you work hard, you put in all the effort, your boss is going to notice, and good things will happen.
Right.
HR is there for you, and that things will just naturally progress. And that is not the case, right? If I could go in a time machine, Jill, and go back to the past and smack myself upside the head, that would be one of the things I would do. That is not true.
No. And I love that you bring that up, because I see that quite a bit. And right, where people are like, if I just work hard, and in food safety and quality, right, there is never a shortage for work. And so getting one more program done, or doing one more implementation, or helping one more team or one more project, oftentimes that would just be like, okay, thanks. Now here's the next thing.
Exactly.
And it doesn't always lead to the next step. And so I'm so glad that we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of what that means, and ways that you can still go into the job and the career that you want.
Yeah.
And kind of shift that mindset.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be the person who decides where you're going. And the interesting thing is, and I'm sure this is true for everybody as well, is you never end up where you think, right? When I was in college, so I had a undergrad degree in cellular biology and physiology, pre-med. I was going to go to medical school, and then I changed my mind. And then I'm out in the world of work, and it's like, okay, well, gosh, I guess I better start making some money. What do I do? Right. So you just kind of fall into things too. You have to be careful with that. You have to plan these things out. And I think it's probably a little easier now. People have more tools available to them with the internet and all these type of things. But you have to plan these things, and you have to be responsible and say, okay, where do I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And kind of keep yourself right. You're going to have these things going back and forth, right? Of course. And you have to figure those things out. And you have to make important decisions for yourself too, such as if you decide that, okay, I was born in this town, I'm not going to leave this town. Well, you're going to really, really limit what you can do. So if you go the other way and say, yep, I'm willing to relocate, and I'm willing to look at opportunities and advance my career, That's going to open up different paths too. So all of these different things that you do are really going to help decide those career paths for you. And those things need to be taken into account. And sometimes we're too close too to those things.
Yeah.
And so
And
go ahead.
I'd love to know even people who are on today, like, think back when you first started, when people would say like, hey, where do you want to be in 5 years? What kind of answer did you have? Because Bryan, I love that question, because I remember thinking, I remember the response of something like, you know what, I just want to grow and learn and, live a happy life. And I think back and I'm like, Jill, you really missed out on more opportunity there to define what that means.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I just kind of moved along where things showed up, or, what came next. And not that that's bad. I wouldn't change it because it got me here. But I think about, gosh, how could I have helped and made a bigger impact for people around me in our industry had I been more intentional on what I was doing and where I was going?
Exactly. And I mean, so your career path, I think there's lots of parallels between that, right? So for me, I grew up in Wyoming and went to college and those type of things. And of course, the advice of your parents, which is, all right, get good grades, go to college, get a good job, work there for the next 40 years. That was kind of the advice that was given when I was a kid. You're kind of like, okay, right. And you kind of listen to it. And so I started off in the world of work and found a job down in Colorado, working at a small company, making medical devices, doing MIC, ID, microplates. And that's how I got introduced to the world of microbiology. And working in a clean room all day, which I tell you, Joel, is not fun. You're head to toe, you got the little glasses, and every time you breathe, the glasses fog up, and you're just like, oh, right.
Are you saying like a hairnet and a smock really isn't that hard for GMPs and PPE?
Yeah, exactly. The whole bunny suit thing. Oh my goodness, that was just going in and out of that room. It was just this half-hour procedure to get all gowned up and clean everything and do the sticky mat thing and all this type of stuff. And I'll date myself on this here too. So I'm like, okay, we went through a really intense FDA audit when I was there. And I'm like, wow, this is not fun. I'm like looking around for something else maybe. And I found, get this, everybody's going to laugh at me. I found an ad in the newspaper for a microbiologist. I'm like, oh, okay. So that was my first move into food. So then I became a microbiologist for Leprino Foods and started off in the lab there. And it was really a formative time because the company was growing really fast and we were doing new methodologies and we were super busy and it was a ton of fun. But I kind of got to a point, Joel, where it's kind of like, okay, I've mastered this. I can get all the work done. I kick butt every day. What else is there? Do I want to continue doing this forever? And I think people kind of reach that decision point. And for me, it was like, no, I don't. There's got to be more than this. And so I transferred to a different department and was doing technical work with the whey products and things like this. I was doing lab stuff and quality stuff and working with the plants and dealing with customers. So it was a really cool role in that area. But a lot of times too, within companies, they see you from a certain perspective. Oh, that's Bryan and that's what he does. And you get put in a box and you have to be aware of that when that happens. It's like, okay, do I want to stay in this box or do I want more? And this is an intentional piece, I think, that you were talking about. And I was like, no, there's more for my career than this. And so I interviewed for a position and really got my first head of quality role at that point in time. In my early 30s, running quality for a food company in Pennsylvania. And wow, was I in over my head. Oh my goodness. I had no idea, right? I had multiple plants across the US, constantly traveling, trying to figure this out. It was a steep learning curve. And luckily I did pretty well. And after that, then I moved up to a larger company and headed up quality for them for North America. And that was in Buffalo, New York, which my wife was none too happy with my choice in moving to Buffalo. Super nice people, very friendly, nice Midwestern culture, those type of things. But yeah,
wings,
the weather,
lots of wings.
The weather is terrible. Yeah, the wings are awesome. And beef on weck. If you're ever in that area, have beef on weck. Good stuff. And so they had the opportunity to come back out to Colorado and went out to White Wave Foods and started working in quality systems and those type of things and worked my way up through the company there as vice president within the White Wave and Morningstar groups. And after that, I was head of quality for a sugar company, and then another CPG company, Boulder Brands, who was then acquired by, let's see, it was original. Let's see, they're part of ConAgra now. They were acquired by Pinnacle. So all these food mergers and acquisitions are going on at that time. And at that point in time, I was like, well, it's time to try something different. I need to take my skill set outside of kind of the corporate world and go out on my own. And so that's kind of where that came from. There was a step in between as well, between doing this, where I was running the consulting, auditing, and training groups for Eurofins North America, which was fun too. So it's always interesting, isn't it, when you look back on your career and how things progress and how one thing leads to a different thing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's interesting. And so we all end up where we are, but would I change anything? It's kind of like you. No, I would not, right? Everything along the way you learn from your successes and your failures, right? If something doesn't go right, you need to go back and step and look at that and say, well, why did that happen? And figure all those things out.
Well, and I love how you talk about even when you moved over to the role in Pennsylvania and stepped in, because I relate to that, because when I stepped into my role, I didn't even know what I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And so, these blind spots that we're not even sure, that we don't even know they're there, and we're not sure if people will tell us about them. And that makes that learning process even longer. And so that's where I think it's amazing that there's so many resources now to help people through different spots, whether it's blind spots or even spots that, like, I just could use a little bit of guidance here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I think that's a big problem, Jill, that I think we have in quality assurance and food safety and in technical roles is we think that we can solve it ourselves, right? We think that we can work through it if we just have more information, if we just get that master's degree, if we just become a PCQI, et cetera, then those things that we want are going to somehow happen. And that's not true.
No, and I love, even, as I went through this and as I work with other teams through this, it's not just the technical part. And I love that the Food Safety Foundation has kind of this, I'm going to call it kind of the one-stop shop when it comes to, like, how do I keep up on technical things? Because otherwise, I remember spending hours searching for, something or papers or something, just on different topics to better understand risks. Yeah. So there's that whole side, but then the whole human side, because no one teaches you how to be a leader. Mm-hmm. And even when they say, well, just find someone that you kind of emulate and follow what they do, that can get you, I think, part of the way in the game, but they too may have just kind of stumbled upon where they're going. And so how do you help even kind of leapfrog that? So I know we work on that, and I have to put this little plug in, because I even have Bryan's book, The New Manager Mindset, which kind of captures some of the stuff that you learned. But I think that's what I love about this community in food safety is, how do we get better together and share so that we help fill in those blind spots and we help make life easier for each other?
Absolutely. Yeah. And excuse me. Yeah. The whole purpose of that book was that transition point that we all go through when you become a leader, right? So I was a microbiologist working at Leprino Foods, and I was really, really good at microbiology. And then I got promoted, right? I'm no longer a microbiologist, right? They say, okay, here's your office and here's your desk. Now lead this team. And they leave you there. And you're like, okay, everybody go do stuff, right? And you have no idea, right? It's sink or swim. It's sink or swim, but it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't have to be. And I think, even as you went through that, like, what was your biggest takeaway as you did that transition, looking back now?
Yeah, exactly. Is that you don't have to do it alone, right? And I wish if I could go back in a time machine, and if I had access to someone like you who could help you and provide coaching and training and assist you and provide that unbiased perspective and give you guidance on, okay, well, what are you thinking here? Why are you doing that this way? Excuse me. Well, that's the way I've always done things. Well, maybe there's a better way. Have you thought about maybe this, right? And that kind of, I think, transitions too, Jill, into kind of what we were talking about here too, is I think a lot of times people get confused with those different types of definitions as well, right? What is a consultant? What is a trainer? What is an advisor? What is a coach? Maybe we can kind of walk people through those things.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great great thing to clarify, because I think so often just in our conversation, consultant has been around for so long that we always say, oh, well, we'll just hire a consultant. Well, to consult what?
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that I love in food safety and quality is often I meet people who are already like, we already know what to do, but we need a consultant because they're more than 500 miles away from where we are. So they're an expert. Has anyone encountered that, or does that sound familiar? So I always like to really help people understand, like, what is the gap that you're trying to fill? Because I think, like you said, each of these have something different. And I often think of a consultant now as I have a gap in a technical issue or somewhere with a risk that I need someone to help fill in the blind spots of what I don't need or what I'm missing. That's how I think of a consultant. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think so too, right? That there's something specific that you need. So, okay, I need to transition to SQF version 9, right? I know there's some stuff that I need to do, but I really need to get this done quickly, and I need an expert to help, right? And it's going out and finding that consultant who has really deep expertise in that area, who can say, oh yeah, I can help you knock that out really quickly, right? So it's a win-win situation from the standpoint of it's going to accelerate your process and cost you a lot less. So if I have to spend weekends and nights and, I'm spending 500 hours trying to get my plant transitioned in my spare time because I got other stuff to do, versus hiring a consultant who already has a process, who already has templates, who already knows how to do it, and they can do it in 100 hours, why would you not?
Yeah, and that's what I almost want to do, like the big timeout, because I think that's really an interesting point that you made. I think often in food safety and quality, when we get handed some type of project like that, we're like, all right, we just got to hammer it out. Yep, I'm going to work nights, weekends, I'm going to just do it. And really, I think I love that enthusiasm. And I know everyone is capable of doing those things. But yet I think, we talked about this earlier, what's that cost?
Yeah.
How is that helping your well-being and being able to show up to do the other things? Because I bet you had a full plate of responsibilities, including leading team members, before something like that just showed up on your plate.
Exactly.
And so I think having that outside help is really, when I think about companies who say our values are, people are our greatest assets, good, now show me. Show me that you really believe it is, and help me have outside help to do this work.
Right. Well, I think a good example of this is within facilities. We see this ourselves as quality managers. So let's say that you have a really good supervisor in the lab, and they're out on the floor and they're helping and they're doing investigations and they're making the plant better. But they also spend a big chunk of their time covering shifts and doing lab tech work and pHing and things like this. And in that scenario, all you really have is an expensive lab technician. You're not getting your money's worth. And people understand that, right? So if you're paying, I don't know, let's say $40 an hour for a lab manager and the lab technician is making $20 an hour, you're losing all that value of what that person can contribute. So you see that in your team. Why don't you see it in yourself, right? If you as the head of quality or the quality manager are doing the exact same thing, you're losing that value, right? You have to be able to objectively step back and look at how you're using your time and saying, is this the best use? And if you can leverage that and hire in resources to cover that gap so you can do the value added things, that's where you need to spend your time.
Yeah, and as we're talking, I was just looking, Tom has a really good comment about consultants and that technical part and helping coach people through that too. And I think that's a wonderful skill that consultants can bring, because right, when consultants leave, we still want to leave our clients in a better spot than when we came in, and helping them really help themselves along the way. So when you do find a consultant who is able to help provide some of that coaching, that is like gold in the mine. Yeah. So really, that I think is a fantastic way to, to really help that long-term plan and help that person develop and their systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it circles back, Jill, to what you were talking about of the balance that you need to have to be successful, right? Because if you spend all your time grinding it out, working the extra hours, doing all these type of things to the detriment of your family and your health and all these other type of things, you're gonna pay a price at some point.
You will. And I often, people who hear me know that I talk a lot about mindset, choices, actions equal results. Mm-hmm. And that equation is much bigger than typically it used to be just actions equal results, like make the right actions to get the right results. And then it kind of expanded to like making the right choices so you get the right results, or the right actions to get the right results. And I think all of those things are important. But I think sometimes the part that we forget is that upfront mindset of, having confidence in ourselves, or knowing it's okay to reach out, or knowing we're enough, and all because we do ask for help doesn't reflect on our capability and what we can offer and our value. Mm-hmm. And so it's about kind of knowing our value and where we fit and how we help along the whole system.
Yep, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, Tom's on a roll here. He's got another good comment here too, on where consultants can close the technical gaps, but then he's also bringing in the concept of a coach, right? Mm. And how a coach really helps you then think about things in a bigger perspective. And here's the ironic thing about advancing your career and moving along and doing bigger and bigger things is, as you do that, what you do as a technical person becomes less and less important. It becomes more abstract. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned before, I started off as a microbiologist and things like that. I haven't done that in a really, really long time, right? It becomes more of the people side of things. And then also getting out of your department, right? If you just have this view of, okay, I'm the quality guy, that's all I care about, right? If it's quality, I'll talk about it. If it's something else at the plant or at corporate, I don't care. That's not good. That's not what leadership is looking for. Mm-hmm. And I'll let everybody in a little secret here. At a company I worked at, we had every quarter a meeting where we got together with HR and all the senior leaders in the company. So all the vice presidents in charge of all the different divisions. And we would talk about, and the goal of the meeting then was there would be about 3 or 4 of us at every meeting who were then slated to get up and talk about one person in our department who was a star. Right? Somebody who was doing an exceptional job and that we thought had the potential to advance in the company to do more. And the purpose of the meeting was to let the other department heads know about that person. So if opportunities came up in those areas, they could potentially be looked at. So for example, you have lots of crossover between quality and engineering, right? We were talking about this a little earlier before the call. There's lots of similar skill sets around equipment design and all these type of things, right? There is potential then, if you have a superstar in quality and there's an opening in engineering at the next level, maybe that's a good fit, right? But it's all about that next step. It's not the things that you're doing now, it's what you can do in the future. And the ironic thing, Jill, is a lot of times quality people or technical people in general can lock themselves in. And this is the ironic thing. If you believe that getting that next set of letters after your name on LinkedIn is going to get you the career advancement, right? So I'm MS, PCQI, FSMA, SQF, on and on and on. The ironic thing is it's probably the opposite. What you're probably doing is locking yourself into your current role. You're making yourself perfect for that. You're developing the technical skills, but you're not developing the leadership skills. And that's where someone, to Tom's point, right? I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I think that's where a coach can really help you.
Well, of course, I'll say yes to that. But I also think, kind of like you talked about, we know that there's kind of like being HACCP trained and being a PCQI are kind of permission to play in the food safety scheme. So totally understand that. But I also think what I see is when people feel like they're being held back because, oh, well, I don't have that certification, or I need to have that degree, or I need this. Honestly, that's where we spend a lot of time going, well, what's going on up here? Because usually that's a mindset where there's this fear of like, well, what if I'm not enough? What if I don't know enough? Right. And that's where a coach can be really helpful, because they're not in it for your company. I mean, yes, they want your company to be successful, but only through you. And that's because they're there just for you.
Right.
And where you want to go and getting you the development and support that you need. Because
Yep.
even in my own experience, when I was trying to become a better leader, my leader, I love engineers. I'm married to one, but he was an engineer. He
Mhm.
too was in the same spot where he had fantastic technical background, but he
Uh-huh.
wasn't the best leader. He wasn't a bad guy. I love him, but he wasn't a great leader. And
Mhm.
so every time we had conversations around development, it was always in the element of, will it fit for the business? And I really challenge people to go, how do we make things so that they fit for humans? Because by helping us fit and know our purpose and find more meaningful work, doesn't that really pay off in the bigger picture for the business?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%.
So yeah, so obviously I'm a big fan of that. So, and I don't know if that's something that you've had any experience with, to even see kind of how that plays out. But
Yeah. Well, I think part of it too, right, is, and this is another thing within companies that people figure out, hopefully they figure out, is early on you think that the HR department is there for you, right? Oh, they're going to help my career and they're going to give me advice and they're kind of like a counselor in high school. And you say, no, 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 no. HR is there for one singular purpose. They're there to protect the company,
yes.
right? They're there to set up job descriptions and pay scale buckets and make sure that sexual harassment doesn't happen and all these type of things, right? They're not there to help you develop your career.
No. And I know there's many great HR people and functions in companies, and they've come a long way. But I also know that they're not a one size fits all. So I used to have this vision that some of those really big food companies that I know are a little more advanced in those areas, like their teams would never need help. They have everything at their fingertips.
Uh-huh.
And I find it really interesting because I have many conversations with people from their end clients because that one size doesn't always fit everyone. And so really helping people understand that, if you're not getting what you need from your organization, it is okay to look somewhere else. I mean, for that help.
Yeah.
In fact, right, if you don't advocate for yourself, no one else will.
Mhm.
And really, what's holding you back from stepping into that space to ask for what you need?
Yeah. Early on in my career, so I was at a company for a period of time and I wasn't advancing. And I actually hired a coach. I hired an outside coach. And one of the things that she taught me was how to write a kick-ass resume. And on the resume, this stuck with me for, I don't know how long ago this was, over 20 years ago, where she taught me this. And she's like, a resume is just the invitation in the door. Sure, right? There's basic criteria that you need to meet, but beyond that, nobody cares. You need to show them what you did. And so what I had a 2-page resume, and on the front page was my work experience and my credentials and all those types of things. But the second page was all the things that I did and how I brought value to the company, right? So I went in, I created this, I modified this procedure. As a result, complaints went down by this amount, saving the company this amount of money, right? And that opened up amazing doors for me because I was able to show people how I did. So part of what I would look for as a vice president, when I would look at resumes for directors, for example, if they just focused on the tactical things of what they did in their job, no, I already know what you do, right? You're a food safety director. I get it. What did you do, right, to make the company better, right? And a lot of people struggle on that. There's one question, Jill, I always ask during interviews, and it's this. It's like, okay, as you look back on your career and all the things that you've been able to accomplish so far, what are the top 3 things that you're most proud of? And you would be amazed how many people can't answer that question.
Well, and part of that's taking time, allowing people and taking the space that you need to be able to even sit and think about what that means. Because we're so used to doing, that to be able to pause and go, what am I proud of?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I see, and I love being able to show quantitative results and show money savings. And I know that is the language of business. But I also do like to challenge people to say, what are the other things? because I think the things about being a good leader and having engagement aren't always reflected in perhaps like the company survey for engagement.
Mhm.
And so really even including some of those things, because that is something that is hard and we still struggle with quantifying very well. There's just, I think, way too many laws of averages when it comes to looking at engagement and the questions, and people get confused. Like, well, when you say top leaders, do you mean executives or my leader? And so I think there's some gaps in that, even though it's a good step forward to better understand what big direction are we going? Are we even in the right direction?
Right. Well, and I think that's where a coach like you, Jill, can really help people understand those type of things.
Mm.
Is like, what are those values to you, right? And how do you then use those values to chart where you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, number one on that list of those things that I look back that I'm most proud of is not, okay, I put this program in place or I had this complaint rate or things like that. It's the people that I was able to help advance to the next level. So there are people who used to work for me who are now vice presidents of quality at other food companies. And I love that, right? That I was able to help elevate and hopefully bring them along in their career and help them with their goals too. And I know that I can pick up the phone at any time and call them and ask them questions, and they're happy to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Well, and I love as you're talking, I'm reading a few of the comments, and I love that, Austin, that you bring in the food safety culture side, because I think all of this ties into this, doesn't it? Because I am an advocate, and my perspective is that, yes, food safety culture is for the whole organization, but I'm a little biased because I love our food safety groups. I still think we're the face of food safety.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about how people see food safety, like, we've all seen this, right? The food safety quality manager who's running around in the plant trying to firefight everything and looks frustrated and what message does that send?
Right.
Versus someone who's able to come out and have engaging conversation and in the moment coaching and talk to people about what's going well. And that's all about that culture and getting the support you need and having leaders that see that's more important or a really big part of your role, more than just doing a management review or creating a new system or putting a new program in place. How do we have other people help with those things as well?
Yep. I early in my career, I was guilty of that. And I would, you go out on the floor and you'd be like, do that, right? And then you'd go back to your office and everybody's like, well, what was that? Yeah, that's the quality guy. And I changed my approach, Jill. So what I would do is, let's say that I was touring one of my plants and I would be out on the floor and I would see somebody and their hairnet's not quite right? It's on, but it's kind of a little crooked. It's like, it's not the way it should be. Mm-hmm. So in the past, right, you would go up to that person and be like, hey, fix your hairnet. Right. And then you walk away and everybody's like, who was that? Oh, that's the VP from corporate. Yeah, don't worry about him. We won't see him for another month. And what I changed that to is I would find the supervisor for that area. And I'd be like, hey, Sally, how you doing? Oh, good, Brian, how you doing? You're in charge of this area, right? Yep, absolutely. This is my team. And I talk with them a little bit and say, so everybody here's been trained on, GMPs and hairnets and everything. Yep, absolutely. Great. I love that. Can you please explain to me why that person over there, why their hairnet looks like that? And they'd be like, oh, right. Mm-hmm. And then I would leave. And the conversation after I left was the important conversation, right? Because now Sally would go up to that person and say, what are you doing? No, hairnet. Like that was the VP of quality. And he just came over and embarrassed me because you're not doing what you know how to do. So guess what? I'm watching you, right? And so that's culture, right? That's where it happens. The relationship between the supervisor and their team members is where that culture happens. And teaching that is so important, right? And going around and barking orders is not how you build culture.
No, and not everyone barks, and and not saying that you were, but I think it's also this paradigm shift, because I too was in that trap that as I even moved up, the organization, the ladder, I still was responsible for doing a lot of the technical work, getting programs and doing risk assessments and doing this group and being an outreach here. And I love doing that.
Mhm.
But what it meant was that I didn't build in capacity into my workday to be as intentional with people as I needed to be the leader.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I challenge people to say, how do you shift from my workload is doing another review or doing more record review or writing more SOPs to I'm engaging with this person and here's what our focus is. And I'm engaging with this team and here's what our focus is. And not always just technical, but even some of the human skills about how are they communicating food safety? How are we doing this together? And that looks a little different than how we've done it in the past.
Yeah. It used to be quality control, right,
Mhm.
versus operations,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. And that just doesn't work, right? We all
Yeah.
know that those two
That,
silos, that can't work.
yeah.
And that's the other part, like how in food safety and quality do we support operations for whatever their biggest challenges? Because we
Yep.
know food safety touches every area of a company.
Yep.
So if we help solve that, we're on the path together. We're being the team players we need to be. We're influencing food safety. And while it may not be the thing that's the first thing on our list, it's still progress.
Yeah.
And so building, it's that bank of trust and that bank of, relationships that really can help us move forward with the food safety culture as well.
Yep. I think, yeah. And so there's some really good questions here. Tom's got a good one. We'll answer that here in a second. I wanted to kind of tag onto that of one of the lessons that I learned, which was absolutely critical in the quality side for me of helping develop really good systems, was we're really good at documenting how to do things right.
Mhm.
But what people need is, what do we do if it doesn't go to plan? And not making the decision in the spur of the moment. So no one wants to make bad product. Operations, quality, nobody, right? We want to make good product, and we want to do it on time, and we want to hit our efficiencies and all the things that we need to do. So what I did in the quality systems, I spent a lot of time saying, okay, well, all right, here's our temperature at receipt. Okay, great. What do we do as a management team if it's not right?
Mhm.
Do we just go, and bring it in? Because then I'm not even going to write this, because that doesn't make any sense. So let's talk about what we do, right? And we broke it up into green, yellow, and red zones, where yellow was, we may have a problem, maybe we don't. As a management team, we need to decide. And red was, oh, no, that's a line we can't cross, right? So something shows up, milk shows up at 50 degrees. Oh, God, no, we can't accept that ever, right? So when that happens, the decision, Jill, has already been made.
Yeah.
All you have to do is remind everybody that, okay, guys, we don't have to wring our hands here. We've already figured out what to do. Now let's just go do it.
Well, and I think that's a really good approach or outcome of when you have really good leadership.
Mhm.
Because in my mind, if we're working on this food safety culture, that's all about how, right? It's about empowering people at the front line who's there doing it to be able to make decisions
Yeah.
and to know what's good, what's not good, and be confident in that. So as leaders, if we're sitting back going, oh, we're just answering fire after fire after fire, then I really challenge you to take a look in the mirror and go, am I really being the leader I need to be?
Right.
And
If you spend your entire day fighting
firefighting,
fires and you go home at night, have a glass of wine, and think you did your job, all you're doing is maintaining the status quo.
yeah, and I'll pick on receiving temps, right? If I'm
Mhm.
firefighting receiving temps, shame on me. If
Yeah.
I'm firefighting, oh my gosh, we have some massive thing that's getting us into incident, perhaps recall. Okay. But when you talk about what are the things that make you most proud, when I had worked back in chicken world and we did firefighting all the time when I started, it was over the top exhausting, and you guys all know what I'm talking about.
Brutal.
And one of the things I'm most proud of is while we had originally operated all as separate facilities, we came together, and when I left, we had an encyclopedia essentially of control plans. And the people who were doing the work knew where to go and knew what to do. So whether it was a receiving temp or it was foreign material or it was a high temp or a problem here, there was guidance at every step that people could then own and make the next call. And really helping empower people to do that and feel confident and know that we're there to help you. And if it gets screwed up, that's okay. Because you know what? We didn't do our job to have already mapped that out together. So let's do that and be better together.
That everybody, I want to underscore that of what Jill's talking about there, right? If you want to be successful in your career, it's exactly that right there. I love stories like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I think, but that I didn't learn until I screwed up because I wasn't a good leader.
Yeah, exactly.
That didn't just come overnight. That was the pain of, wow, now I'm in charge. So, all right, folks, let's do it my way.
Right.
And maybe it wasn't overtly that way. It was, well, I was promoted because I know so much. So let me show you what we need to do. And yeah, I'll listen to you. But I wasn't a good leader at first. I was nice, but not good.
That's a perfect example of how a coach can help you, right? It allows you to leapfrog over 5 or 10 years of absolute pain, right? To get to the solution, right? And if you can save yourself that and get to that next level quickly, totally worth it.
Well, I'm going to add in there and having a community, because Bryan, I know with Food Safety Foundation, part of that is sharing. So that way, find the outside help or community that works for you, because we're not all equal, and that's okay. We all have different areas that we work in, but find something that works for you and participate, because it's all about that giving and getting, and that's where we all get better. Yep. And having uncensored, authentic conversations versus, being, I know a lot of times I used to be hesitant to share, like, hey, what is our salmonella prevalent? Ugh, nobody wanted to talk about that. But if we don't talk about it, we think we're alone. And to come to find out, right, all that data is published now. You're not alone, no matter what category you would have been in or how you were performing. So at least have a conversation so that collectively we can move forward and get better together.
Yep, no, that's a good point. And so even though we all work in the same field, we have our own particular passions or deep dive areas. So for example, for me, it's SQF, right? I was on the SQF Technical Advisory Council for 6 years, and I left as vice chair when I became a consultant. And yeah, I know a whole lot about SQF, right? If you want to set up a good SQF system, I can help you. In the Food Safety Foundation with EAS, there's a gentleman who's a member there who was a district head of FDA for 40 years. He knows more about FDA processes and regulations and how FDA works than I'll ever know. He's forgotten more than I will know, right? And if you can talk with somebody like that and say, hey, what do you think FDA would react to in a situation like that? He's going to be able to tell you, right? Having access to people like that is super valuable.
It is. Yeah. And Bryan, Tom has a question in here, and I love it because I think it's about millennials.
Yes.
And that entitlement. And gosh, I certainly am no expert in this, but one of the things that I'm doing is looking at how I can myself be more curious about what everybody brings to the table. And even with millennials, I look at it and I think, man, gosh, their energy is invigorating. And they're like sponges. They just want to learn along the way. And yes, that's some of their movements, I'm going to stereotype here, seem a little bit like leapfrogging from having to, I think I saw something in the comment about paying our dues. But I also think, okay, how can we look at that and go, how do we integrate that? Because they too have some skills and some energy and some insights that none of us have had. Yeah. How do we bring that into our organizations and help challenge us? I'm gonna say us because I'm the Gen Xer who, right, I've got kind of a process and I can be a little bit tunnel visioned at time, to help me break out of that. But how can I also then help maybe a millennial go, hey, here's the importance of a process. Here's the importance of consistency and being predictable and documenting and some of those things that sometimes we may sense that they don't think are important or as valuable as we do.
Right.
So I don't know if anyone else has things to add, but gosh, we're at a really fun time of kind of this transition point of where they're way more of the workforce than any other generation. And so how do we help with that?
Right, exactly. I mean, so the message we were taught when we were young of get good grades, go to college, work for a company for 30 years, you'll advance and get the gold watch, gone, right? And millennials know that, right?
Mhm.
They know that's not a true story. We're figuring it out way after the fact. They live in a different world, and that's fine. And there's a ton we can learn from them, right? Their ability to gather information and look at the big picture is huge.
Mhm.
And you need to learn how to talk with them and frame things that way. I think it's a lot of what we're talking about right now, right? They want to have a sense of contribution, right? They don't want to be a small player. They want to be part of the big picture and be seen that way. Great. How do you help them do that?
Yeah. And I love that, because how do we get out of our way so that we can help them really trailblaze forward and bring us all to a
Mhm.
new place? It doesn't
Yep.
mean they're trailblazing past us, but we're all together on this. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of my best friends is in his early 30s, and he lives in Mexico, and he's a super successful entrepreneur. And I learn a ton from that
mm,
guy. Right? He gives me a new perspective on things, and it's funny because he teases me, right? And he like rolls his eyes and say, "Oh, okay, right," and because he helps give that. I think the millennials, and using them to that advantage and to open up your perspective, right? To your point, Jill, we get this, right?
mhm,
And we look at the generation older than us the same way, right?
mhm.
We think this is a different story this time around because it's us. It's not, right?
Nope.
Every generation is different. And to your point, right, stereotyping is not how to do it either, because they're not all the same. We're not all the same.
Mm-mm. No, no.
So let's see. So Tom here, Jill. So Jill Foslin, I agree with you. Communicating the value and bringing willingness to learn and take on challenges. I moved organizations and took risks to take on challenging roles.
Mm.
Absolutely. How would you suggest to make the change? Wow, yeah, that's a good question. It's always different, isn't it?
It is, right? And I think, Bryan, that kind of circles all the way back to kind of our beginning about, you know, how are you being intentional and advocating for where you want to go? And as you're doing that, that will help you think about, okay, if I'm going to change roles and I'm going to be intentional in it, what do I need? Or what's missing? Or what is that next step? And moving in that path.
Yep,
So,
absolutely. And I think the key lesson here, and one of the main takeaways from this, right, is the answer as technical people we think is technical. And
mhm.
the odds are it's not.
Oh, no. And, I still always go back. And like I said, the first part of my equation is always mindset. And it's always, we're usually the biggest thing in our way. And I get it. I have been there when I've been like, operations did this, or they won't let me do that, or so and so said no. Wow, I was really a naysayer.
Yeah.
And, for me too, it was a big mindset shift to say, okay, how could I have looked at that differently? How do I embrace that and explore with them versus putting up the no because that doesn't fit for food safety?
Mhm.
And, it's really about that mindset of saying, how do I move into that new place? How do I be curious? How do I explore? How do I invite others to come explore with me instead of maybe having a boundary around me where they're like, ugh, I don't want to see that food safety quality person. So,
Yeah. 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 If you get stuck in that box of, yeah, negative Nelly, and it's
mhm,
all no, 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 and you need to do things my way, and you're hurting yourself big
mhm.
time.
You are. And I don't run into too many people like that, but yet we all have moments of that. And so it's
Yeah.
just, right, we all know it's about training our brain to take the other path. And when
Mhm.
we do that, it affects everybody around us. So it is totally a win-win when we think about whether it's food safety culture, being intentional, all of that rubs off.
Yep. Quick story to close this out. I remember when I was in that first leadership role, running quality of the company, and we were having a problem with gaskets. And so what they would do is they would put the damaged gasket, sanitation would put it in my office, because I was lucky. I had an office at the plant. And so the corporate headquarters were there too, but I spent lots of my time in the plant because I wanted to really understand what was going on. So I would get a Whirl pack with a broken gasket on my desk. And I'm like, okay, right? So now immediately you go into firefighting mode, and you're like, oh my God, there's gasket in the product. Where is it, or whatever? And I would call the poor sanitation manager and wake him up because he had to clean overnight, and we would try to track it down and figure out what the risk was, right? I took it all on myself. And operations was very happy to let me do that, right? Because now it was my decision, right? It's like, okay, what do you want to do, Bryan? Do you want to short orders, or do you want to risk this product going out with potentially having foreign material in it? Right? It's not going to hurt anybody, but we may get some complaints down the road, and it's going to be your fault. And I was like, oh, right. So I sat back, and this happened 2 or 3 times. And on the 3rd time, I finally got smart, Jill. And I went to the plant manager's office and put the gasket on his desk and said, okay, we need to get together and figure this out. We need to have a team meeting and put everybody in. And until you guys can explain to me where this gasket went, the product's on hold. And you need to figure out if it's a PM problem, if it's something going on with the way the lines are set up, all hands on deck, right? And he looked at me like, oh, right? Just that little shift, right? Not me taking it on and being that crazy person running around trying to fix that fire that day, right? And realizing that it was a team effort. And we figured it out, right? It was a problem with the actual gasket material. It wasn't correct for where they were using it. So we changed to a different type of gasket, and the problem went away.
Yeah, and that's amazing, because that, like you said, is just a little bit of a pivot, but it's also setting, kind of showing that we're all in this together, and we're a team, and I'm here to help, but yet I need you guys to be part of it. And I think that's a big thing, like in food safety and quality. How do we help people help themselves? Because if we, like, and I think you've talked about this being in the box, that if we're the ones that are the answer person and we're doing all the troubleshooting and we're doing all of that, that's just letting us stay in that spot longer. Right. So helping others help themselves is a really big part of that. So love that story.
Yep. And having a coach to help you make those realizations can make your life much better. And let's see here. So Tom's had some amazing comments here. Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate your input here. In our global food safety world, the opportunities around for all of it's in our career advancements. Absolutely. Especially in international companies are changing U.S. business culture. Relationship building is also a key ingredient to career development and learning. Jill and Bryan, great chat this week. Food for thought and a happy Friday. Perfect comment to close out our talk for today. Thank you, Tom.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, everybody, please, take this into consideration and kind of take a step back, right? We can all use this to be introspective and utilize this, and then reach out, right? You're not alone. I think that's the overall message for today. Don't think that you're alone.
And you don't have to do it all yourself.
No, right? We all do this because we have a great passion for food safety, right? There's, as I like to say, Joel, there's easier ways to make money than food safety, right?
I love that.
We do it because we care. Right. And the ironic part is, if we do things well and things are moving smoothly, people don't notice because they assume it goes that way. But there's an incredible amount of work to make that happen. And it's very, very satisfying. So thank you, everybody out there, for what you do for food safety and everything in this area, because you help make sure that this coffee that we're drinking here this morning is safe. And I appreciate that. So enjoy your weekend, you too, Jill. And we'll see everybody back here next Friday at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern. And everybody who participated, and guys, all the people from around the world checking in here too and joining this conversation.
Thank you.
Yes. So thanks again, Jill, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. Have a great weekend.
All right. Bye.